Okay, I'm going to demonstrate three different types of paint layer from the perspective of opacity, and I'm going to use these three shapes to demonstrate them. A layer of paint can either be transparent, which is called a glaze, semi-transparent, which is usually called a scumble, or it can be entirely opaque. There are many techniques of oil painting. It's very complex. It requires a very complex methodology, and every painter's method is different and as complex as he is willing to bring his technical knowledge. But there are only three options in terms of the opacity of a paint. It can either be transparent, semi-transparent, or opaque. There's no other options. So I'm going to start with the cylinder and demonstrate the method of glazing with a transparent paint. And I'm going to use ultramarine straight out of the tube. I'm using Gamblin 1980 ultramarine blue. I don't usually use Gamblin, but I was given some samples recently and asked them to use them in a video. So this will be a new experience for me, and I'm going to be comparing them to Winsor & Newton, which is the paint that I usually use. Now when you're doing a glaze, you have two options. One is to lay the paint on as it is, straight out of the tube, with a rougher brush, and you essentially dry brush it on and rub it into the surface. This surface I'm working on is matte board primed with gesso. The other option is to thin the paint and use a softer brush. So this is just a simple filbert brush with a very soft head, and you can thin the paint as much as you want, and it makes it very easy to paint. It comes right off the brush. Whereas if I use this same soft brush with this hard untreated paint, it delaminates as I run the brush. So as much paint as I put on, you get that break. Whereas if you add medium, you get a nice unbroken brushstroke. So I'm going to continue to use the medium because it's just a little easier to put on. And this is a medium I haven't used before. It's by Gamblin. It's called Galkid Gel. And it's an unusual medium. From the look of the tube, you might think that it's has the consistency of oil paint, but it doesn't. It's a gel. It's very soft. It thins the paint. It doesn't make it quite as runny as it would if you were just adding oil to it. The closest comparison I would make is a medium I've used before called McGilp or Neo McGilp. It has basically the same consistency as that. So now I'm going to brush this on. And you don't want to use too much medium in your paint or it'll destroy the paint film. And you don't want to put too much paint on the canvas when you're glazing. Because remember, this is a transparent layer. The whole point is to see through it. You want to be selective about how much you put on, and in total and in certain areas. You can control how much you put on in certain areas. If the glaze isn't saturated enough, you can always put another glaze on top. You don't want to put too many glazes on top of each other though, because like I said, the whole point is that it's transparent and you see through it. And if you have too many layers on top of each other, then now I'll just repeat that so you can see it, because with the glare it's difficult to see. I'll show you a technique for getting a straight edge. I take a piece of scotch tape, lay it along the edge, and then you can color outside the lines and you still get a nice hard edge. Using a harder brush now. Even with the medium and the paint, it can be difficult to keep the layer consistent. A harder brush makes that easier because you can really push into it and scrub the paint. Okay, now I'm going to take a clean brush and I'm just going to even this out. take a fan brush, clear out the brush strokes, and we're done. And now if I wanted to alter this, I could just take some white paint and I can add my highlights in this way. A thinner paint will blend into the wet paint that's already on the surface, or a thicker paint without any medium in it will sit on top. So you can add shimmering highlights that way. Peel this off. Like I said, you have a nice hard edge.